Okay.
Very good. Chair Dan Stepanek has asked me, Secretary Angela Jameson, to be Chair Pro Tem this evening. Could I hear a motion to that effect, please?
Second motion.
We need a motion proposed.
I would like, this is Dan, I would like to nominate Angela Jamieson as chairman pro tem for tonight's inland wetlands meeting.
Second, anyone seconding that?
Second motion.
Okay, you need to put your button on, mic on, Adam.
I second the motion.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Then I am Chair Pro Tem for the evening. I would like to nominate Dan Stepanek to be Secretary Pro Tem this evening. Does anyone like to second that, please?
Second it.
Thank you. Commissioner Redin, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Any against? In case I missed anybody? No. Abstentions? No. Thank you very much.
Let me take the roll right now. Let me take the roll for tonight's
sure.
special meeting. Pardon me?
Please go ahead.
Dan Stepanek, I'm here. Angela Jamieson,
Present.
Beth Brunelli,
Present.
Sandy Redden,
Present.
Beth Sanford,
Present.
Anthony Zillo,
Absent.
Priscilla Wilkie,
Present.
Katie Osley,
Absent.
and Adam Ramirez.
Present.
Thank you. So I would like to ask Commissioner Ramirez to be seated for Commissioner Sillo, who is absent. You good with that, Adam?
Yes.
Thank you. So next item is approval of the agenda for this evening, which was sent to you all. Any comments on it? If not, may I hear a motion, please?
I'll move.
Thank you, Commissioner Oiki.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Redin. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Aye. Any against or abstaining? So that agenda is approved unanimously. So with that, I'm going to open the regular meeting. Item number 4, application number 23-24-14, 377 North Wilton Road, St. Luke's Foundation, Inc. Construct new synthetic turf field on top of proposed parking structure. Reconfigure the parking lot north of Watson Field into a corral parking area. Fine grade and landscape. So we're here this evening, having closed the public meeting at our last regular meeting, and having had a number of meetings where we've heard from a number of different experts and others. We have interveners as well as applicants and their various experts. So there's been a lot to digest. So this evening, we're going to start our deliberations regarding where we are thinking that our decision should fall, with a view to probably, although we could take a vote tonight, with a view probably to taking a final vote at our next regular meeting. And we're going to start with Town Attorney Gelderman just going through a number of things that we should take into account as we deliberate on this application. Now, before we do that, there's one thing I would like to do. I'd just like to go around the room and ask each commission member to confirm, one, that they attended each of the meetings that discussed this application, or if they missed a meeting, that they watched the video, and 2, that they have reviewed all the documents on file. So Dan, could I start with you, please?
Yes, I confirm that I have attended each one of the meetings dealing with the St. Luke's Foundation, and I have reviewed the materials. Yes.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Woike?
I have done both.
Thank you. Commissioner Redden?
Yes, I've done both.
Commissioner Sanford?
Yes, I've done both.
Commissioner Bernali?
Yes, I have done both.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Yes, I have done both.
And myself, Angela Jameson, yes, I've done both. So thank you. And so now I'd like to ask Town Attorney Gelderman to go right ahead with the comments that he'd like us to take into account.
Thank you, Chairwoman Jameson. I know this was a contentious application. There were individuals both in favor and against the application. That doesn't mean that you will look at it any differently than you look at all of your applications. And that is, well, first, let me start with, in addition, there's an intervener's verified petition that was filed with the commission. So it requires its own vote as to whether or not the intervener has established by substantial evidence that there will be an effect, a negative effect on the natural resources, air, water, and other natural resources of the town. And that means the public trust in the air, water, and natural resources. The public trust is the ability of the public in general to utilize those resources, air, water, and other natural resources, which I think would probably include wetlands. At any rate, that's a separate consideration for the commission and a separate vote at the end when you do take a vote. With respect to the application itself, I think all I wanted to really talk about was the standard that our courts have established when reviewing an application for an activity that's regulated under the Inland Wetland Act. And essentially what that means is you as the commission need to determine whether the proposed activity will cause an adverse impact to a wetland or watercourse. And the way you determine that is through substantial evidence, which is generally defined as expert testimony. So the substantial evidence standard requires evidence of a specific actual harm to the environment rather than a general impact to it. You know, by the environment, now we're talking about wetlands and watercourses. So you need to find, and you are the finder of fact, and you will weigh all the evidence that was presented to you during the course of the hearing and make a determination as to whether or not there is that evidence of a substantial evidence of a negative impact, adverse impact on wetlands or watercourses. So what constitutes substantial evidence? Well, as I mentioned, it's expert testimony, but it's also the evidence has to be such that it's quantitative, it is specific, it's not general, it's not could be, maybe, possibly. It's got to be specific harms that are identified through expert testimony. And it's not enough to say that, for example, I'll use something that's not, I don't think, part of this matter, but for example, if mud or silt or something were to flow into a wetland or a watercourse, it's not enough to say that that is a substantial adverse impact. There has to be an analysis of what that specific impact will be. So it's a two-step process. Is there a direct, is there something that's flowing into the wetland or watercourse? And if so, what is the adverse impact of that on the wetland or watercourse? So that is essentially kind of the bar that you're looking at. And as I said, you're the finder of fact, which means that you are going to have to weigh the credibility of the various witnesses that appeared, the expert witnesses that appeared before the commission, determine which of those witnesses you consider to be most credible or more credible, and ultimately make a decision based on that substantial evidence. The standard for the intervention is very similar. There must be substantial expert testimony in the record to establish what the verified petition claims to exist, which is that there is conduct proposed, which is reasonably likely to have the effect of unreasonably polluting, impairing, or destroying the public trust in the air, water, and other natural resources of the state. And again, that public trust means the ability of the public in general to utilize that natural resource. So those are the two things that you're going to consider. I'm sure you've heard a lot of evidence. I have not reviewed the record. I am not familiar with any of the testimony, and that's intentional because it's one of the things I have to avoid as your counsel is trying to guide you in a certain way toward a given certain decision. I'm not here to do that. I may have to defend that decision in court if there's an appeal taken, but it's your decision as the Inland Wetland Commission. And I will provide, answer questions if there are questions of a legal nature that are not related specifically to the application. The record is closed. So things in the record can be discussed, but nothing else can. But if you have legal questions, I will be available to answer those.
Thank you, Attorney Gelderman. Before we start our discussion of the application, does anyone have any questions they'd like to put to Attorney Gelderman regarding, process, procedure, what our obligations are? Okay, but we can always come back to him as we go through our deliberations. So what I would like to propose is that we go around the table and hear from each of us how we're looking at the application currently, whether we think that there will be an adverse impact on the wetlands and watercourses, and what kind of evidence we can cite from the record to support whatever our preliminary thoughts are in this area. And I always think that the great thing about having a deliberation like this is that you really get to hear what other people think. And, they often come up with points that perhaps you hadn't fully considered when you were going through the record and coming up with your own preliminary observations here. So I think we should just use this as a great opportunity to discuss where we think we're going with this, and perhaps people may change their minds even, as we go through the discussion, and that's just fine. And then at the end, when we seem like we've kind of talked ourselves out, I'll call for a straw vote, not a final vote or decision, but a straw vote. So with that, who would like to go first in terms of setting out how
Commissioner Redden, I'd love to go first.
Commissioner Redden would like to go first, so jump right in, please.
I've reviewed our meetings on video. I've been through all the evidence. And I think with the attorney saying step 1 and step 2, planning and zoning may have issues. For me as a commissioner, I don't believe that there's any adverse impact to anything that we're looking at from this project. There might be things that planning and zoning, other neighbors are going to not be happy. I mean, anytime there's an issue like this that's so emotional on one side or the other, Personally, as a resident, would I wish there was an alternative? Absolutely. As a commissioner looking at the adverse, I think the wetlands are in good shape right now. I believe from the evidence that we haven't seen that there's going to be an adverse impact. So I'd have a very hard time voting against this. I can't see any evidence. I see a lot of speculation. I see a lot of things from outside the area. Good testimony on both sides. I think unfortunately, some people are not going to be happy, but what our job is to look at, number one, is there any impact currently? And I think the new project going forward, my only concern is that while it goes forward, the site work and construction, should planning and zoning say yes, that there's no adverse effect during the construction. But I don't think that we have anything. I've been through everything on the list. I don't think there's any impact.
Thank you. I mean, do you have any expert testimony that you would like to, cite as being really important in coming to your conclusion?
Well, I think our town engineer has looked at the water plan and said there's currently little, if anything, and there's been almost no impact on the current wetlands. The field needs to be replaced. The engineer has said that this new plan is more than sufficient, and I believe her. And I've been through the list. I'm not an engineer. So that's number one, the engineer's plan. Number two, we had the water company come. William Kenny Associates. Then we had the gentleman who came in the last meeting who represents the reservoir, and he doesn't see any impact now or in the future. And I think that's the most important piece. This waterway is feeding people in our town and in the town of Norwalk, and it doesn't appear to be any negativity. And I think he would be the most concerned.
Thank you. So who would like to go next? Commissioner Sanford?
Yes, just to build on my neighboring commissioner, I looked through the record and revisited it and rewatched the last session, which I thought was very helpful. And just to, I don't see that it's been proven by the intervener what the harmful effect would be on the wetlands and the watercourse. Specifically, some of the record that I focused on was the town engineer and her testimony on January 22nd, where she made a few points. One is that's Maria Coplet, that the plan complies with the town drainage policy, that it meets DEEP's guidelines for water quality, and that in fact the ground discharge would improve with the implementation of the plan. So that was one thing in terms of the record that stood out to me. Also, in terms of the first taxing district, who I guess you might say is the only neighbor that seems to be okay with the plan. And they're an important neighbor because they really are the guardian of water quality partly for New Canaan, mostly for Norwalk. And Brian McCann took the plan and provided it to the engineering firm, and they went through each one of the components of the plan that St. Luke's had put forth, the engineering plan, and made recommendations, and every one of those recommendations were incorporated into the plan. And what the engineer for St. Luke's said, the woman who testified in the last, engineer Flynn?
Yep.
Yeah. Said was, they had a good plan before, but that just added to kind of the belts and suspenders component of it. But given that the first taxing district obviously paid to have a very, professional engineer review the plan and, modify it and make it even better. And it was responded to by the SAMART engineers. I think kind of attests to the fact that the stormwater system is going to be more than adequate and better, probably better than what is there now. So those are some of the testimonies that I referred to in thinking about this case.
Thank you very much. Who would like to go next? Commissioner Brunali? Oh, no, he doesn't. Yeah. Commissioner Brunali? Oh, he does?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dan, did you want to go next?
Yeah, I could go next. Yeah. As of today, April 3rd, my current position, if either to approve or deny the St. Luke's Foundation application is to I'm in slightly in favor of approving the application. However, I really believe that if I was to approve it, I would suggest implementing a number of costly special conditions. And those conditions would really be, I don't think there's been enough testing done of the soil and the water. And we must make sure that if implemented, that that there would be no negative adverse impact to either the water or to the soil. And I'm not sure in my own mind that that's been proven, okay? I would suggest, and I'll get into the special conditions after I hear what other people think on the commission, but I'm reading some notes here. And I really didn't hear an alternative to what they were doing. But the special conditions I'll get into later. I think that Attorney Finn had some expert testimony. I really did. In his wind-up remarks, and Weston and Sampson, they had some very positive things to say. But going to the negative things, I think the Norwalk Watershed Association had some very poignant remarks to make, and so did George Logan. So I'm still on the fence, but I'm leaning towards approving the application with a few very costly special conditions.
Thank you, Commissioner Stepanek. Commissioner Brunali, could I ask for your thoughts?
Someone else could go first.
Okay, Commissioner Woike?
Well, I'm very much inclined to vote in favor of for the approval of their proposed parking garage playing field. I believe that the testimony given by Bill Kenny was very convincing. That and as he said, there would be no positive adverse effect on the wetlands. The town engineer's proposed stormwater management was convincing. I feel the interveners did not provide enough evidence that would show that this damaged the wetlands at all. So for those and the reasons, what else did I have there? He said that the water was clean, the well was clean, that they were tested, I think he said 3 times a year. And that there would actually be no work done in the wetland itself. Now, those are my reasons for voting in favor
Thank you
of
very much.
approving this.
So Commissioner Ramirez or Commissioner Brodali, would one of you like to speak next? Looks like you're up, Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you. I have gone through the presentations and the information given to us. And from my thinking, we're actually missing part of the thought process here is we're focusing on the possible contamination flowing from the surfaces of the playing field and the parking lot, which would flow into the water capture treatment systems underground. But this is an elevated playing field. And I have to wonder how this field is going to be managed in terms of clearing leaf litter, in terms of cleaning the field after its usage in a tournament, because I am more concerned actually with the airborne crushed rubber flowing off that field into the wetlands. This is not a level playing field. It's an elevated playing field. And any worker using a backpack blower will easily dislodge the crushed rubber. Number of events, I have no idea how many events would be at that playing field. But just the fall cleanup, it requires blowing several times. So if I were to approve this, it would have to be with the condition that there could be no blowing of that field. Otherwise, I don't know how many pounds of that crushed rubber would be airborne and then fall into the wetlands. So that being said, I am comfortable with the treatment of the wastewater flowing into the capture basins on either end of the garage and from the corral. But it is the airborne contamination of the water course of the wetlands that has me concerned.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramirez. Commissioner Brodali?
May I ask a
Oh,
question to
please,
that,
sorry.
those comments? Did any of the experts bring that up as an issue?
None of the experts brought that up as an issue.
So you're speculating?
No, I'm stating the fact. Between Mother Nature and power tools, you will move that material. Just as Dan Stepanek said he has certain thoughts about conditions, that would be a condition for my support.
Yes, Commissioner Redden, just a thought. I went through, I agree with your concern because that was one of my thoughts, and I can't find any actual evidence that virgin rubber actually does damage. I know we believe it probably does, and it may, and it's from this, what we've seen from the highway that they were talking about. We don't actually have evidence. We have a speculation, and it's a tough one, right? So how can we regulate that leaves and things get blown in one direction? I don't know. I don't know if I would ask the professional staff here is, can we make that as a condition? I don't know. But just, I did not find convincing evidence that the rubber actually causes damage. It might, but I didn't see that as evidence.
Thank you. Commissioner Bernali?
So at this point, I would say I am leaning towards the approval of the application, although I am not, I wouldn't say I made a final decision in my mind at this point. I think that essentially comes down to the standard that the town attorney set forth. That the proposed activity will cause an adverse impact, and there has to be substantial evidence of that impact. As Commissioner Redding alluded to as well, we heard a lot of input from the neighbors, and I think all of us probably can sympathize with the position that they are in and how they're feeling about this application. But that is not the basis for how we as commissioners have to make a decision. We have to base it upon the regulation and the standard. In terms of the record, we heard a lot of testimony from different experts, which I think has benefited this application in making perhaps some improvements to it. From my perspective, the town engineer's testimony that the application meets the town's requirements. I mean, the stormwater is related to the wetlands. We're not actually engineers, and we're not deciding the engineering components of this application. But that carried weight for me. Also, William Kenny's testimony that in his professional opinion, it's not going to cause a negative impact to the wetlands. And if anything, there might be an improvement to the wetlands. Going related to the testimony of William Kenny and the standard, I think there was the 3 water samples that were taken. Let me see if I can. The surface water met or exceeded the Connecticut Aquatic Life Acute Standard. The field test indicated healthy water quality. And overall, surface water exiting was of substantially similar or higher quality. And the introduction into the record of the testing of the wells. There has been a virgin rubber, not virgin rubber, sorry, a crumb rubber artificial turf field in this site, not extending into the upland review area, but very close to the dimensions of what would be the new field. And the testimony of William Kenny is that the wetlands are currently, high functioning or well functioning wetlands. The water quality meets healthy water quality by Connecticut standards. The new field is not exactly the same as the current field, but I think having, you're going to have a virgin rubber field. The applicants have agreed to have the material that would be used tested, the specific material, not just based upon, average for that that material, but the specific material that would go in at this site. I think it makes, I don't know that any of the counter evidence has risen to that kind of high standard of showing that there will be anything going into the wetlands, and even if something is going into the wetlands, what the specific adverse impact on the wetlands will be. Because there isn't any evidence of any there now, even with the crumb rubber field that's been there for 18 years. I also found credible Weston and Sampson's report. The first tax district stands in the same position as other neighbors. They're an adjoining property, and they represent indirectly a whole lot more people who are not physically neighbors of St. Luke's School. Specifically with the artificial turf components, they indicated that the concentration of PFAS compounds reported posed no significant risk to field users or the environment. But this is a developing area of science. And when I read that, I kind of felt that captured sort of the state of where things are now. I felt a lot of the testimony for the neighbors was certainly informative, but it wasn't specific to this site. It touched upon how runoff from roads is affecting salmon in Washington, and there was a lot of testimony about the potential impacts to the environment, or to soil or to plants. But there was no connection between, I felt there wasn't enough connection between the activity, the proposed activity, and how it's going to impact this particular wetlands, how the materials are going to get from the proposed activity to the wetlands. And even if they are getting there, there was no quantification of that. Going back to what the town attorney said, it's not just that it might be possible or could be or maybe. There has to be quantitative evidence in the record. And I think that's what is, I don't think at this point of my going through the record that I saw any quantitative evidence of how much PFAS or how much pollutants would be in the wetlands, and specifically what the impact on this wetlands would be. I think it's kind of nebulous. There's a suspicion that maybe there would be an impact on this wetlands, but I don't know that it was ever articulated specifically what that impact would be. Would it be to the soil? Would it be to the plants, or so forth?
Thank you, Commissioner Brunali. So I think the only commissioner who hasn't spoken so far is myself, Angela Jameson. So let me just elaborate on how I'm thinking about this application. I am very concerned about the potential environmental pollution caused by artificial turf, including potential adverse impacts on wetlands. It's an area where the science is clearly evolving, and I suspect that in a few years there may well be scientific evidence that would render this evening's discussion moot or at least easier. But that said, at this juncture, I'm not convinced that there is sufficient evidence in the record in relation to what St. Luke's is proposing, either that the artificial turf, which is in rubber crumb and currently in place, has adversely impacted the wetlands, or that the new turf field of virgin rubber will adversely impact them. And so I'm leaning towards approval of the application and rejection of the claims of the interveners. And I base these conclusions on the following testimony. Bill Kenny, on the 15th of February, in his report, concluded that field tests had indicated healthy water quality. And quoting from him, the surface water exiting the property was of substantially the same or higher quality than the surface water entering the property. And then on the 18th of March, in a report, Bill Kenny also said that tested wells contained water safe for human consumption at the time of sampling, and that the 4 untreated well water samples yielded water deemed safe for drinking purposes at the time of collection. And then I also draw on the testimony of SMRT from the 15th of February that stated that independent environmental tests indicated that the material to be used on the field passed safety standards. Another very telling piece of testimony for me was the statement by Brian McCann of the 1st Taxing District at our meeting on the 18th of March, where he said the applicant had agreed to all the suggestions made by the 1st Taxing District's consultants, Weston and Sampson, and therefore the 1st District didn't have any objections to the application, although he did ask that we consider the 1st District's suggestions as to special conditions. And also very telling from my perspective was the conclusion of Weston and Sampson on the 28th of February that concentrations of PFA compounds reported posed no significant increased risk to field users or the environment, although it did add that this is a developing area of science. I was glad that we got the report from the town engineer, Maria Coplet, and that the proposed storm water management system meets the town's drainage policy. But for me, that wasn't compelling in concluding that there was no adverse impact on the wetlands or watercourses, because that was not her remit in writing that report. She was looking at whether the town's drainage policy had been met and also deep standards in this area. But I was glad to see that the application, passed those 2 tests. So I too are leaning towards approving the application with special conditions. So just to sum up, I would say that we have 6 commissioners who are leaning towards approval and 1 commissioner who has reservations, but is still considering approving the application if certain special conditions were to be included. That is my summary from the discussion. Does anybody want, Kathleen?
I'm not certain, but I wasn't sure whether or not Dan was still on the fence, and so I'm not sure who you're referring to, but
Oh,
there may be two and possibly three that are still on the fence, so I don't know. I'd say continue, maybe ask them.
Okay, so, anyone those who are on the fence, maybe you'd just like to, speak and clarify your position after hearing, the comments of everyone on the commission.
Yeah, this is Dan. I'm not on the fence as much as I was when I began the meeting tonight, but as long as we can get special conditions in there, I'd be in favor, okay?
Okay, anybody else would like to speak who feels themselves to be on the fence?
So back to the new playing field. One thing I have not been able to find is how many pounds of this crumb rubber are applied to make the playing field usable. Secondly, I haven't heard of the maintenance cycle. How often does crumb rubber have to be applied? And if so, how many pounds are applied every time there is some sort of maintenance done?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You can keep going.
Commissioner Brunei?
Were you done?
I am finished.
Oh, sorry.
Those are my questions.
Just as a point of clarification, you were, oh, sorry, Commissioner Brunelli for the record. Just as a point of clarification, in your questions, you were speaking about crumb rubber, and the infield material is going to be the virgin rubber. Were you intending to speak with respect to the virgin rubber?
Yes, respect to the virgin crumb rubber. I don't have a concern about the toxicity of the material per se. I do have a concern with the volume of the material that is lost on an annual basis. That is the mitigant I'm looking for.
Right. This is Angela Jameson for the record. So I think we should just be clear as to the terminology we use. And originally, the application was for a new artificial turf field that was crumb rubber, but the applicant has changed that to virgin rubber. So I think we should be referring either to crumb rubber or virgin rubber, not virgin crumb rubber or crumb virgin rubber.
Well,
But, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here.
actually, that's one of the points of clarification. My understanding is that traditionally it was recycled tires.
Yeah.
So it wasn't virgin rubber, it was simply recycled tire or recycled crumb rubber. And now they're speaking about applying virgin crumb rubber, which is why I'm trying to differentiate between those two. Again, I don't know the toxicity of recycled tire rubber, crumb rubber versus virgin crumb rubber. Again, my concern is with the volume of the material that will be flowing into the wetlands on an airborne basis.
Right.
Hence the question about how often, how much is applied initially, and then how much is applied on an annual or biannual basis to make up for lost material.
So Commissioner Redden, for the record, I think we have to take into account that the field that's existing with the crumb rubber, recycled tire, whatever it might be from, needs to be replaced and is going to be replaced. So that's happening, at one point anyway.
Kathleen Holland for the record. I did pull out of the record that was turned in as part of the application on February 15th. Melissa Flynn, who is the design engineer from SMRT, did provide a memo regarding all the specification sheet for the crumb rubber. I can give it to you to reread because you may have everything here.
Yes, please.
Answers your question?
But
For-
that's the initial application.
So this is what they're actually using.
Right. And how often does it have to be replaced? Because nothing is permanent. I can tell you that the artificial fields at the high school are in sore need of maintenance. I don't know how much material has to be replaced, because there is material being lost.
Right.
Right.
I do remember some testimony, and maybe others will too, that there is periodic replacement.
Yes, there
but not
is.
Full replacement usually. I forget what the year was. Maybe we could go back and look
Right.
at the record, but
But there is a difference between having a elevated playing field and a ground level playing field, because you will have airborne material flowing off that rooftop. Question is how much? If it's simply kids kicking a ball or hitting a ball, it's not a lot. But if somebody's using leaf blowers, it is a lot.
This is Angela Jameson for the record. I mean, you raise very good and interesting points, Commissioner Ramirez, about the maintenance of the use of leaf blowers on the turf field. But, I mean, that will happen even if the existing turf field continues to be used, or if a new artificial turf was put on the existing space. I don't think there's anything in the record that shows that the volume of airborne matter will be greater because of the elevation of the playing field.
Agreed. I don't think it's been actually brought up as a point. But knowing that we're at elevation, knowing that it can be blown into the wetlands, I don't know what volume possibly could be blown in. As I stated, if I were to vote in favor, I would have the condition that this would be cleaned manually versus using equipment that's powered, which could lift the material much more easily into the air and into the wetlands. Again, I don't know if it's a pound that would flow over the field, or is it 10 pounds? But right now I'm looking here and it's stating, I believe 27 to 30 pounds of material per cubic foot. Is that correct? No, that's what this is. Again, I don't know how much goes onto this field. Is it 1,000 pounds? That's a question I have, but again, for me, the mitigant is simply not having a physical material. I'm not concerned with the toxicity, virgin versus recycled. It's how much solid material would be flowing. We don't allow silt to flow into the wetlands. Hence, this is a solid material.
I'm sorry, somebody wanted to say?
Yeah, Commissioner Sanford, just to remind us that we're here to look at the expert testimony and evaluate whether there's specific quantitative harm to the wetlands. And the points that you bring up were not brought up by the interveners or any of the experts that testified. So for us just to speculate about what the effect of a elevated field and what it's going to be blown into the wetlands, I think is a speculation that doesn't allow us to adhere to the guidelines that we're supposed to go by today. That would be my thought.
Angela Jameson for the record. Maybe it would be useful at this point to ask Town Attorney Gelderman for any pointers on the extent to which we can or should take into account airborne pollution, given that it wasn't raised by the interveners and there's nothing in the testimony that that provides evidence that it will occur and that it'll be harmful.
Thank you, Pete Gelderman, for the record. Yeah, if the evidence is not in the record of what the impact of that will be, and remember, you're not dealing with speculation. You're dealing with also not just speculation about whether it will end up in the wetlands, but speculation about what the impact to the wetlands will be. If there's not expert testimony in the record as to what that impact will be, it wouldn't be an appropriate reason, for example, for denial. I'm not suggesting it's a reason for denial. It might be a condition, but there needs, whatever the commission finds needs to be supported by substantial evidence in the record. And unfortunately, the time to ask questions about that would have been during the public hearing, because the record is closed. And if there's information that's not available to the commission, it's not available and can't be made available because the record is closed.
So, and this is Angela Jameson for the record. Maybe it's a good time to talk about special conditions that we might want to have included were we to approve the application. We could start with the one that Commissioner Ramirez has brought up, which is that there should be manual cleaning, maintenance of the turf field to avoid, gas charged leaf blowers blowing it into the wetlands. How do other people think about that?
Is it all right if I make one suggestion? The concern would be blowing it towards the wetlands.
Yes.
The wetlands are on one side of the field. If it were something to consider, if they were, I don't know what the ultimate maintenance of the field is.
Yeah.
But if they were to be mandated to go, what do we say, left to right rather than right to left?
Or west to
you know,
east.
Or,
Away from the
yeah,
wetlands.
away from the wet. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know ultimately what the practice will be.
Right.
But just making a special condition that's manageable is advisable. That's one suggestion.
I agree with that suggestion.
Anybody want to comment further on that as a possible special condition that debris on the field should be blown away from the wetlands?
I think what we're really, this is Beth Sanford, what we're really talking about is we want to be able to have some kind of review about procedures related to the field that might have impact on the wetlands. But we're not professionals on how these artificial fields are taken care of. I don't know if they're using so to put a condition when we don't really have the information about what the process is, I think is getting ahead of the curve on that. But I think regardless, and I think it applies to a number of, not just with the maintenance of the fields, but some kind of supervision during the construction period and after the field is in practice that will give us confidence on an ongoing basis that there is no impact on the wetlands.
So something more to the effect of, management practices regarding the field shall not inadvertently blow debris. Debris is a general term. It could be leaves, it could be paper cups, it could be, could be footballs in or towards the wetlands. If that's more general, because I think to Beth Sanford's point, we're not maintenance experts of the future care of the field, but the idea of not having items blown into the wetlands by manual equipment is I think a reasonable request or special condition.
Right. Thank you. This is Angela Jameson. I think that the applicant has agreed to certain ongoing tests. Maybe we should just review what the applicant has said that they would be willing to do. And I think Kathleen Holland is going to see what she come up with something that will be helpful here, because it seemed to me when I was considering this that it seemed important that the underlying soil should be tested when the old artificial turf is removed for PFAS, heavy metals, and any other contaminants, to identify the need for soil remediation. That was something that to me seemed important. And I also thought that maybe we would want to see annual testing of the runoff into the wetlands and watercourses for PFAS, heavy metals, and microplastics. I don't know what others think about those suggestions.
My question with respect to the second suggestion of annual testing of the runoff, if there was an issue in annual testing, what would be the resolution of that?
Well, that's a, thank you, Angela Jameson, again for the record.
Sorry,
It's a
that
very
was
good,
Commissioner Bernali for the record, sorry.
that's a very good point. And maybe we should, if we do go down this road, add to it that if there were concerning results, then there would need to be a remediation plan put forward to maybe the agent, director of inland wetlands, to review.
Or Beth Sanford, or it would be a matter of testing water quality. I think, again, I'm not sure we should be the ones that dictate exactly what we're testing in the wetlands. But the measure should be whether the stormwater system is working as it's intended. And perhaps if there's indication of some harm, that there's some revisit to see if there's any other additional measures that might be able to be implemented to control the flow into the wetlands. Again, we're not here as the experts, we're here as the ones to try and put up the guardrails that's going to ensure that there is no adverse effect.
Sampson and Watson and Sampson.
Weston
Weston and
and
Sampson actually had a list of special conditions that they wanted us to consider. If you've got this in front of you or on your screens, it's in an email that Brian McCann sent on the 28th of February. And it's page 2 of the report from Weston and Sampson. They request that the manufacturer shall certify that each component of the artificial turf system meets the current California Proposition 65 and European REACH standards. Number 2, each artificial turf system component to be used in the construction of the artificial turf field must be tested for the presence of PFAS. The testing results must be provided under notarized letter for review and indicate the following. All products provided for incorporation into the synthetic turf system do not contain PFAS as quantified by EPA method 1633 or engineer approved equivalent. The PFAS testing method utilized must report at least 40 PFA compounds, including the PFAS regulated by the state and on the most current European Union REACH and California Proposition 65 compound lists. And then number 3, the analytical results are to be provided to the district for independent review and comment prior to the shipment of the sampled materials to the project site. So that's very much dealing with the construction of the turf field. I wonder if well, I'm suggesting that we ought to have some kind of ongoing monitoring, because as a number of commissioners brought up, there will need to be maintenance and there will need to be some replacement of virgin rubber on that turf field as it's used and cared for. So maybe every time a new virgin rubber application is provided, there should be the same requirement for testing.
Within the 5-year period of the license.
Yep.
What date was that document you were just referring to? I'm looking for it on the town site.
Brian McCann, February 28th.
Additionally, we had these from the town engineer, so those should be made into the record. too.
Yes.
We can go over those.
While everybody's looking at that, maybe I can just go over the special conditions suggested by the town engineer, Maria Coplet. She asked that a comprehensive set of plans and drainage report shall be submitted, reflecting all revisions prior to the issuance of a permit. It is recommended that the engineer of record or another acceptable certified inspector monitor construction activities and provide weekly observation reports, supplemented with observation reports after each rainfall event greater than ½ inch of rainfall. Thirdly, that the applicant file a legal maintenance agreement with the town clerk. Reports documenting adherence to the stormwater management operation and maintenance plan are to be filed on an annual basis. And this is prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, provide separate construction logistics plan set. And then submit a $500 drainage analyst review fee to payable to the town of New Canaan.
Angela, this is Dan.
Yeah.
I think that sounds good. I'm also wondering if to appease some of the concerns by the public that voiced during the public hearing, testing of wells, maybe not as frequently as the testing that's being run off from the garage, but I think that we should put in some such type of a program to test some of the wells of the neighbors as close to this as possible.
Well, this is Angela Jameson for the record. I mean, I concur with your thought process here that there are, very real concerns in the minds of neighbors about the quality of their drinking water. But, those are private wells. I don't think we actually have the power to require testing of private wells. I mean, how can we require St. Luke's to test the wells that are on the property of their neighbors?
And there's no evidence of any contamination.
I don't know, it depends on how much it costs. Maybe there's a regular program or something like this. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know quite what's involved in testing of wells, but it might be a thought to help win over the neighbors.
Well, I hear you on that, but that really isn't our job. No, on the Inland Wetlands Commission, we have to think about the impact on the wetlands and the water courses. And,
Yeah.
P&Z has much more discretion because they're looking at this in a legislative rather than an administrative capacity. But the residents, if they are concerned about the water quality of their wells, they can have it. I'm sure they'll have it tested,
Yeah.
Also, Dan, Kathleen Holland for the record, you may recall that St. Luke's has 3 wells on their own property, and they're mandated by the state of Connecticut Public Health to test those wells, and they did provide that evidence in the records. So those are the most adjacent approximate
Right.
wells, and they all have no issues, is my recollection. So there is well water testing going on the property.
That's Angela Jameson for the record. That's a very good point, Um, Kathleen, do we recall how often they're required to test?
I thought it was 40.
I don't recall the specifics, but it is a mandate by the public
Okay.
health code because it's a drinking water well for the schools. So
Yeah.
they are following that mandate, that regulation. And that information is turned into the town and Canton Public, the health department. So it's provided to the town.
Commissioner Redden, for the record, I may have said this earlier, and if I did, I apologize if it's redundant, but anytime there's an issue that has this much passion or emotion, our job is not to make neighbors happy or interveners happy. Our job is to look at what an impact is or is not to an inland wetlands. It's unfortunate, some people are not going to be happy, and commissioners may be voting to approve this and not, like it, but we got to go by the regulations that what they're here to follow. I have a question. Is the special conditions that have been listed, Kathleen, is that staff position to document those ahead of the next meeting?
That is my hope.
Yes, okay.
Between wherever you guys land this evening, I will put together the resolution that will include any special conditions.
Right.
For you to further discuss and
'Cause I think
finalize on
For
the 8th.
the conditions that have been listed by the experts
Mm-hmm.
and have been accepted already, I think are appropriate. I don't see any additional other than asking that, blowers be in one direction. I don't know that we have an ability to observe or regulate that, but that can be a condition.
But let me ask you this, how much power do we have in if we find that the toxins are now causing an adverse impact, who do we talk to? Do we, and get this remedied, get it fixed, get it repaired as quickly as
Any
possible?
other violation?
Excuse me?
I'm not sure of this question.
So, this is Angela Jameson. I mean, there would have to be discussion with the school, with St. Luke's, if there were some adverse findings.
Right.
I think maybe as part of the special condition, we should require that the testing of the wells on St. Luke's property is shared with staff of inland wetlands. I mean, maybe that's happening already.
No, it isn't, but it's public record. I can look at it anytime, but yeah, you could add that if you felt. I'm sure the health department would let me know if there was an issue, but boots and
That's
suspenders if you
true.
would like to do that.
That's
In answering the question, I just checked in terms of how often the wells are tested, and I had written this down, but I found it in the record, that the water is tested by a certified testing laboratory in Newtown, Connecticut on a quarterly basis or more, and that's been the case since 2013, and the records are retained for 10 years. So 4 times a year, and this is from the Aqua Environmental Lab in Newtown. And so it's frequent.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you,
this is
Beth.
Angela.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
This is Angela Jameson for the record. I mean, if there were ever to be adverse results from this quarterly water testing, it would be communicated to the health department here at Town Hall, and there would be notification then to inland wetlands. So maybe we don't need to make that a part of the special conditions.
Yeah, and just so, drinking water, well water is not wetlands.
No.
So just,
Right.
we have to be careful to make sure that we are.
That is true. That is
That's
true.
true.
So
I just wanted to clarify, Kathleen Holland, for the record, something Commissioner Redden said. A lot of things that potentially could have become special conditions have already been acknowledged and adopted into the record by the applicant. That's my recollection. If you agree, they don't need to then be also stated as special conditions. So the items that the town engineer had listed in her report, I would recommend that those get adopted into as special conditions. And any other, maybe between, if you have additional things for this evening, I can, start putting them together. But if you, between tonight and Monday, if you have a special condition that you want to bring up on Monday, we can still add it as you give it more thought. Pete, Kathleen Holland here, just as they're in the process of potentially discussing various special conditions, I don't know if you heard what I just said. We're sort of
did.
going around vetting various special conditions. So do you think that I don't know, if anyone wanted to continue to discuss special conditions, they certainly can. But if they have special conditions for between now and Monday, can they get me those special conditions and then they can be brought up for discussion on the 8th?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is Angela Jameson for the record. I'd like to make sure that the special conditions suggested by Weston and Sampson have either been agreed to as part of the application and on the record, or that they are included in the special conditions.
So do you have anything specific? That's what I recall is they adopted everything.
Okay, if the applicant adopted all those suggestions, then that's fine. I don't think we need to spell them out as special conditions. And I think then that would include having the material that's excavated and removed from the current site, both the existing artificial turf, but also the soil underneath it, that will be tested, and
That's my recollection.
that's going to be included. So I don't think we need to spell it out in special conditions if it's already part of the, already been agreed to.
I think, just for clarification, I think the one exception, if we're having them test the later added materials to the same standard as they're having the original materials tested, we'll have to spell that out, because I don't think that was agreed to. That was, I think we were talking about a few minutes ago that when, in terms of the maintenance of the field, when additional materials are brought in and added to the field, that those we were contemplating, at least, whether those should be tested in the same fashion that the original field that's going to be rolled out.
Yes.
That was not in the Weston and Sampson suggestions that was agreed to. So that would have to be a separate special condition.
So I think what you're looking for is any subsequent material that's brought onto used for infill in the 5-year period, the life of the wetlands permit, is tested similarly to the original construction.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Kathleen, this is Dan again. Who is your major contact at St. Luke's?
Julia
Do you have
Gabriel.
one? I mean, or is it a group of people, or do you have one major, if you need to talk to someone, who is that?
I would say it'd probably be Julia Gabriel, who's the head of school.
Okay.
At the facility. They're readily available. If I just have to pick up the phone, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if you need to talk to somebody about something, who do you go to first? That's all I'm asking, yeah.
Probably Julia Gabriel, and if
Oh.
it was something that she couldn't answer, I'm sure she'd get the word out
Right,
to.
right, okay. That's all I wondered.
Okay.
This is Angela Jameson for the record. I did have a few other special conditions, and maybe these have already been agreed to. Firstly, that debris and trash to be removed from the wetlands. Secondly, invasive vines to be removed from the boulder slope. And they are going to be removing a certain number of trees from the boulder slope. I would like to see that the same number of new trees planted somewhere on the property. I think
it was 13 trees.
Yes, yes.
So,
Bill Kenny said, Beth Sanford here, that there were 12 trees that were more than 10 inches
Yeah.
that were going to be removed of the 600 trees.
so as when your first condition, the debris, you mean the existing garbage and debris that's
Yes,
currently? So
yes,
clean
yes.
up
Yep.
the noticeable debris. Okay.
By hand.
Mhm, yep.
And then to remove invasive vines, and any other invasives that there might be from the boulder slope, which is in the review area, isn't it?
Beth Sanford, Angela, do you know, was it reported that there are invasives there now?
Yes, I think it might have been Bill Kenny that reported that.
Because removing invasives, depending what they are, is often ineffective. And, I mean, and to be effective, you have to apply some herbicide, and you
Oh.
definitely don't want that to happen. So be careful about what you
Yeah.
stipulate if it's not doable. Because or doable in a way that is amendable to us. We don't want any herbicides there.
Kathleen, do you have a point of view on that?
Well, when you mentioned it, my thought was the boulder slope is rather intact, and I wouldn't want to do anything to disturb the
No?
boulder slope, because that is actually part and parcel of the development that's occurring here to protect the wetlands. So I would say, other than clipping vines,
Yes.
but nothing further, there's nothing in between. But then, to Beth's point, you'd have to actually do spot treating, and then
Yeah.
you're rather close. So I don't know how big of an issue it is in the overall scope of what you're trying to do.
No,
So
no.
I'm not certain I don't think there's a good answer to
I
have
can
it.
certainly be flexible on this.
Maybe leave that one off for now.
I think there are plenty of places in town, including on town property, where invasive vines
Right.
need some treatment.
But
As an aside.
I do agree with because I noticed it on the site visit as well. There's, a decent amount of debris garbage debris over the years that
Yeah.
has blown down into the wetlands. It's not readily accessible, but by, a crew down there doing little cleanup, I think that's a good reset of that area. And as far as replanting the trees, that's up to the commission if you feel that's something that you're wishing to.
And everybody, excuse me, it's Pete Gelderman. Everybody should keep in mind that what Kathleen's going to do is draft a proposed resolution. She'll include any and all possible conditions that people have mentioned, and then it'll be up to the commission when you actually vote on the resolution. You'll discuss presumably each condition and decide whether or not it belongs there or whether additional conditions need to be put in. So what we're, I think, doing tonight is giving Kathleen an opportunity to put together a proposed resolution that obviously is going to be subject to a subsequent amendment by majority vote of the commission.
Angela Jameson for the record. So are there other issues that commission members or the director of inland wetlands or the town attorney would like to raise? Before we perhaps have a little bit of a summary of where we got to and go around the table for a straw vote, both on whether we would, we're leaning to approve the application, and then secondly, whether we think that the interveners have proven that there is going to be significantly adverse impact on the wetlands. So, this is really the time to raise any other issues that we should think about before we move to a straw poll. Dan, do you have anything?
Not right now, no.
Adam does. I'm sorry, Adam.
No, actually, Commissioner, I was simply saying that I have no further comment. I think we're all ready for a straw vote at this stage.
Okay, very, very good. Well, let's do a straw vote on the, and if you wouldn't mind referring to both whether you were leaning towards approving the application, and then secondly, your thoughts on whether the interveners have met the standard of showing adverse impact. Maybe we can just kind of go round the room. Priscilla Woike, Commissioner Woike?
Yes, I still am voting to approve
Yep.
the resolution. I don't think that the interveners gave enough evidence to say that we should not do this. There are a lot of personal issues with the interveners, but none that really related directly to the wetland situation at St. Luke's.
Thank you. Commissioner Redden?
Yes, I would vote to approve the St. Luke's Foundation application. And I would agree that the interveners do not, I would be against that.
Very good. Commissioner Sanford?
Yes, I would actually start the other way and say that the interveners did not present a case that quantified specific adverse effects to the wetlands, and hence I would vote to approve the applicant's proposal.
Very good. Commissioner Bernali?
At this juncture, similar to Commissioner Sanford, I don't think there is sufficient evidence of substantial evidence of adverse impact, and am inclined to vote to approve the application.
Very good. Commissioner Ramirez?
Yes, on the question of the interveners' position, I don't think they have a sufficiently convincing position as it relates to the Inland Wetlands Commission and what our role is here. And secondly, I do lean towards approving the St. Luke's Foundation application with conditions.
Secretary Pro Tem Stepanek?
I vote to approve the application.
Well, this is a straw vote, so how you're leaning?
I'm leaning towards approving. I may not be here on the 8th, but no, I'm kidding. I move to, not move, but I am leaning towards approving the application. And also, I do not think the interveners had really a credible discussion and research and findings in proving that the application caused an adverse effect on the wetlands.
Thank you. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Angela Jameson, for the record, I'm leaning at this juncture towards approving the application, and I also do not believe at this juncture that the interveners met the really rather high bar that there is to prove adverse impact with the proposal. But the approval for the application would be subject to the special conditions that we discussed tonight, and we can ask Director Holland to flesh those out for us to review at our regular meeting on the 8th, which is Monday. And in the meantime, if anybody has any further thoughts on those special conditions, please get in touch with Director Holland. Seems like at this point everybody is leaning in favor, and also not convinced that the interveners have reached the high bar. Anything else that anybody would like to raise on this application?
Pete,
Oh,
Angela,
I'm
can I make
sorry.
one comment?
Yes, please.
On the intervener's petition, just keep in mind, it's not limited just to wetlands. It's air, water, and other natural resources. However, the jurisdiction of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse, or well, the Wetlands Commission is wetlands and watercourses. So there is law that that whatever the interveners are claiming has to be something that's within the scope of review of the agency. So that's wetlands and watercourses, essentially. I just saying that because some people mentioned wetlands only, but it's for intervention. It's also whether there's a reasonable likelihood of an unreasonable pollution to the wetlands and watercourses in the case of this commission.
Attorney Gelderman, this is Angela Jameson. Thank you for that clarification. It's important, and we do recognize that sometimes we use wetlands as shorthand for referring to a wider range of environmental situations.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Anything else on our agenda this evening? I don't think so. This is the last chance for any other business. If not, could I hear a motion to adjourn, please?
Oh, one question
Yeah.
for Director Holland. This is Commissioner Brunelli for the record again. When we were talking about the additional materials, after the field is rolled out, let's say, and the additional materials that would be brought in, we're contemplating the special condition for testing those materials as well. That would last the 5 years of the license. And I understand the usual license is 5 years. Would bringing in of new materials, I mean, a portion of the field is in the upland review area. Would that be I don't know, regulated area? You know, no, I'm just, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that one.
Yeah. It's a good question. There's a small portion of the field that is within the 50-foot review area. But if you guys want to see this application every time they, that's tricky.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, to do the testing of any supplemental material that comes in post full construction of the field is a reasonable request. That's reasonable, and that can be covered in the wetlands permit.
Okay. But that couldn't extend past the 5-year life of the license.
I mean, it's unusual that you would do that to go beyond 5 years. Somewhat unusual. I mean, if they were to take out, let's say in 5 years, that field fails, let's hope it doesn't. Yeah, then they're coming back for another application at that point. So, or something changes.
Good. Any other questions, comments? If not, would somebody like to propose a motion to adjourn, please?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Very good. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. So thank you very much, everybody, for participating, and to those who've been listening.